Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Cathers, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Arts Council. I want to welcome you to today's Creative Industry Summit Series session, Reading Between the Lines, Common Contract Traps for Individuals in the Creative Sector. We know that this will be a wonderful presentation today. But before we begin, and before we introduce our speaker, I'd like to say on behalf of the Kentucky Arts Council staff and board, we want to welcome you to this webinar series. We also want to take a moment to do a land acknowledgement. And a land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Today, we stand on ground occupied by ancient people whose history has been lost, but whose legacy remains. The evidence of these ancient people can be seen all over Kentucky through mounds and artifacts left behind. Today, over 170 American Indian tribes are represented by their members living and working in the Commonwealth. Let us honor those who were here and those who are here now and build on the legacy of stewardship of the land that they left for us into the seventh generation. I'd like to welcome Tamara Coffey, our program branch manager with the Kentucky Arts Council, to introduce our speaker for today. Tamara?
Thanks, Chris, and welcome to the Creative Industry Summit Series. This is a collection of webinars and online workshops that focus on the business of art with topics for artists, arts organizations, educators, community groups, and more. To see a listing of our upcoming webinars, go to our website at artscouncil.ky.gov. Most of our webinars are recorded, and today's is being recorded, and they can be viewed later on the KAC YouTube channel. During today's webinar, you're invited to type your questions into the chat. Please refrain from including any personal information or asking questions that are specific to an issue you're experiencing that might not also apply to others watching the webinar. This workshop is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Participation in this workshop does not create an attorney-client relationship. So contracts are a routine part of the creative work, but they often contain terms that can quietly shift risks, limit rights, or create long-term obligations that individuals may not fully anticipate. Today's workshop will examine common contract provisions that frequently create problems for artists and creative professionals. Yuha Jung is an attorney focusing on legal issues affecting artists, cultural organizations, nonprofits, and philanthropic institutions, as well as individual creatives. She is a former professor of arts administration at the University of Kentucky, where she taught nonprofit law, governance, and arts management. Yuha now practices full-time as an attorney at Laura Solomon and Associates, a firm that primarily works with nonprofit and philanthropic institutions and individuals. Yuha brings an interdisciplinary background and sector-specific experience to her work, bridging legal analysis with practical realities of creative and cultural practice. Yuha?
Hi, thank you so much for that, Tamara. So I'm gonna share my screen and hopefully you will be able to see it. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. There you go.
Oh, you do now. Okay, I'm gonna make a full screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here today. And for those who are in Lexington, Kentucky, or Kentucky in general, I guess the weather is beautiful today. So I'm glad you chose to be here today. And maybe you can go out and enjoy the weather after this. So as Tamara shared, I now currently work at Laura Solomon and Associates. It's a law firm based off of Philadelphia. But we have clients all over the country and actually world. So we have some international clients as well. And we're really focused on philanthropic work, all kinds of nonprofits, from small grassroots organization to large like universities and hospitals. So it's a lot of fun work, and I really enjoy doing the work now. But previously, I was a professor, and teaching has been my passion, and still is passion. So really happy to be here and talk about fun subjects like contracts. You may not think it's fun, but I think it's fun. So hopefully, it will be uh, easy to understand, but also it's intellectually stimulating for you. And if you have any questions, put it in the chat. And this presentation is not gonna be more than an hour. I'm expecting it to be like about 40, 45 minutes. So that will give us plenty of time at the end to, have conversation. And again, to emphasize it, it's educational only, and it's not legal advice because I'm not your attorney. And if you want to change that, you can reach out. Well, I'll share my contact later. Okay, so let's jump in. So I will talk about what this workshop will do and it won't do. So what this can do is to help you spot red flags and identify when and where to negotiate. And this will not do is providing a deep understanding of contracts. So imagine as a, law students, for example, you take 2 full classes on contracts alone in your first year. And there are so many issues out there they don't even cover. So it's impossible for us to talk about all of it, but hopefully we can get to like important points. And also, again, it's not legal advice that I can provide. So if you have any specific issues that you want to ask about, frame it as a hypothetical so I can answer your question. All right. So framing contract. Again, it can be pretty complex, and I don't know if you have seen it, like some contracts are like hundreds pages long. But hopefully what we're gonna think about today is more like, a couple pages to maybe 10 pages long contracts. Those are pretty common and you have seen them on a daily basis. You may not think you encounter a contract all the time, but think about going to a website and you have to agree on something to even view their content. That's contract. You may not read them, it doesn't matter, still binding. So, those are all examples of a contract. But there are like 3 large ways to look at it. What's included? So what protections are currently written? But also important is what's missing, like what rights are not covered, what's silent, what risks are you assuming because it's silent? And also, even if it's there, is it one-sided? Typically, it is usually one-sided, right? Especially if you are an artist who's doing the work for a client. And when client brings you a contract, that will be written from a client's perspective and their interest. So it's good to have your own contract as well that can really watch out for your interests. And you may bring that to your client. So they have to negotiate on their behalf instead of the other way around. So there are many ways you can think about it, but these are the 3 big ways. What's included, what's not included, and even if it's included, is it one-sided? Is it unfair to you? So why does it matter? We want it to be clear, right? You're going into a business deal, and we want it to be as clear as possible. Even if you're not clear at the beginning, or even if you're clear at the beginning, there will be other things that's going to come out. So you can't possibly anticipate everything, but we're trying to do our best at the beginning. So set out clear expectations and limit misunderstandings as much as possible from the outset. And also, you have the negotiation power before you agree on something, right? Once you sign the contract, that power goes away. You can't really, sometimes you can negotiate, after the contract has started, but that's like very rare. So you want to have your negotiation done before you get into the contract. And also you have the most power before you get into the contract, right? Because they want your work. So use that as leverage. And it can protect you, especially in the creative sector, right? The ownership, copyright, who owns it, right? If you create work, is that work made for hire? Therefore, they're gonna take all of it? Or are you sharing the license? So, instead of you giving everything away, you hold the right, and then you're letting them use it. So there are many ways you can frame it, but just knowing that the ownership is protected or not protected, right? If it's not protected, you want to ask for more money for your work. So just knowing what's in there is important and what you're giving up and not giving up. Also, it's not always about mistrust, right? Like mistakes happen and there are bad people out there who's gonna try to push you like bad contract. I've seen those. But for the most part, it's about protecting their own interest rather than trying to screw you over. So trying to find a mutual ground. It's the process is negotiation. Contracts are drafts. So you want to make sure that they work for you, not just one party. So, having written contract, written agreements really protect relationships. And it's not just about getting paid, but like shifting the allocation of risks, right? How do you, are you assuming or the liability, for example? And if it's written in that way, you want to change that unless you want to take on all the liability, which I don't think you want. So now what I'm gonna do is to walk through important terms that are found in typical contracts. And again, there are so many out there. And if you want to ask me questions about those, I think there will be time for that. So important thing, you want to include scope of work. What are you actually doing? Right? What's the work that you're doing that's gonna get you paid? And you want to be as specific as possible without kind of limiting your flexibility. So if you see something like this, additional duties as requested, well, that's really broad, right? Especially if it's a contract work, you don't want to agree to anything like that. Then they keep asking you things to do and don't pay you for additional work. If you're an employee of a company and there are something like that, that's understandable, right? Because, employment contract can't possibly list everything you will be doing. It's possible, but, typically it's not really practical to do that. So, they will list the big important parts and then at the end, additional duties as requested. That makes sense. But if you're doing one time off work for a company or a client, this doesn't make any sense. So some examples, good and bad. So if you're a graphic designer and if you have a set process of doing it, you will know how many concepts you can do, like how many revisions it takes for you to get to the final product. But also, it depends on the client and how you work, right? So if you know what you're doing, that has worked for you, and you may set like something like this, right? Design 3 logo concepts, include up to 2 revisions, and deliver final files in PDF by April 1st. So it's fairly specific, but also it's not gonna work for some creatives. You sometimes takes more time to create something. You wanna, make sure that your creative processes are respected. If that's the case, you may charge them by hours. So I have a graphic designer artist who charges per hour, and that's been working for him. So he's been using that model. And if the work is more challenging, he will simply, work more because it's going to take more hours. Therefore, he gets paid more. That's pretty fair, but your client may not agree to that. So it's a negotiation and finding what works for you. Another example is to provide logo design and related creative services as needed, or that's too vague, that's too broad. So you probably don't want to do something like that. Payment and compensation, important. You got to get paid for the work you do and paid well. That's one of the goals, right? How much, when, and under what conditions do you get paid? Watch out for something like, there's no payment timeline, right? It says like, or it's silent, that's bad, right? Or it's very vague. We're gonna pay you if we like your work. But that's dangerous, right? Because arts can be subjective and you don't want to agree to something like that. Legally though, people can contract on something like that based on like, if I like it, I'm gonna pay you. Otherwise, I'm not gonna pay you. But don't agree to that because they may say, oh, they may like it, but they don't want to pay for it. And they may say, I don't like it, right? Then you're out of luck. So do not agree on something like that. Also, something very unclear or missing expense coverage. So when you do work, sometimes you incur expenses, sometimes a lot, sometimes not so much. If it's not a lot of expenses and you kind of put it towards like just contract amount, total of $3,000, and your expense sometimes, is like $30 or $50, and you know what to expect, and that's okay, then you can eat that up on your side. But if the expenses are not something that you can anticipate or estimate, then you want to put it in there clearly that all the expenses are gonna be covered by the client, not you as an artist. So, it can be clear. Otherwise, you may be taking on a lot of expenses that's gonna leave you so little money at the end, and you don't want that. So some examples: 50% upfront, 50% upon delivery. That's good because again, you may incur some expenses at the beginning, so you need funds to begin with. So this type of arrangement will work well for something like that. But you may not need it. Then, payment of $2,000 within 30 days of invoice. So that's another way to schedule it. But you want to avoid something like payment to be determined based on project needs, right? That's really vague. That's not clear. So you don't want to agree on something like that. And also it's negotiable. Maybe you want to do like 30% upfront, 70% later, something like that. Or instead of 30 days, you may do like a week, right? From like upon delivery of the product or something like that. And some examples I've seen that are not good from real contract. So for my artist client, he got this deal with a big company, it's a music label company. And they said, and client is a graphic designer. So he was designing an album jacket for an artist that the label had. And the contract provision, one of them said, if we don't like your work or not end up using your work, we're gonna pay you only half of what's agreed. And it was a big contract. It was about like $15,000. And so if they didn't end up using his work, even though he did all the work and met all the standards that's set out in the contract, he was gonna get paid only $7,500. So I'm like, no, that's not okay. That's gonna come out. So we negotiated it. So regardless of the company using or not, he was gonna get paid. So just watch out for something like that. They may sneak in something that you may not really think about upfront. And oh yeah, of course I'm gonna get paid $15,000, but there are more like conditions after that. So read it very carefully. And again, things are negotiable, and the company was okay with that, and he got paid for the work, the full payment. And terms and termination, like how long are you gonna work on, and also can you terminate? It's important to be able to walk away. Some projects at the beginning, it looks great, and you enter into it, and it turned out it's not so great, right? Like think about something like set designing. You're a set designer working for a theater company. You went there, and it turned out the working condition is terrible. You gotta get out. You're gonna get injured. It's just not good, right? Like, can you do it? You should be able to walk away from that. Like, no one should force you to work. That's against the law. But you want to make it easy for you by putting it in the contract. So, like you may say, upon like looking at the example, first one, like either party may terminate with 30 days notice. That's great. That's pretty clean, right? Typically, it will say something like that. So either party can terminate anytime with a certain amount of notice. But if it says like one party can terminate, but the other cannot, that's not good. Or the termination window is really short. Like they may say, oh, upon, just days notice, you got to stop working and we're not going to pay you anything. That's not good. So watch out for those clause in your contract. And also, if someone like your client hired you and then they decided that, oh, it's not the direction I want, I'm going to terminate this contract, but you already worked on half of the work. What do you do with that, right? You did the work and it was terminated not because your own fault. So the work you've done so far, that you have to get paid for. So that's where contract can be very handy. You want to put it in there. If it's not there, they may cancel you and not pay you anything. So, the first example, the second part of it, contractor will be paid for all work completed through the termination date. So if something like that is in there, even though you didn't complete it and they canceled on you, you will still get paid for the work that you've done so far. And they still want the, part work you've done. They pay you, you gotta hand over the part, however small it is that you worked on. But it's a fairer situation than they cancel and you get nothing. And also, if it says something like client may terminate at any time without obligation to pay for unfinished work, right? That's not good. If you see something like that, strike it away. You don't want to agree to that. That's one-sided. All right, this is huge. Intellectual property and ownership issue. So typically, in the arts context, it is intellectual property and often it's copyright. This is not a workshop on copyright, which I can give in the future, but not today. But just briefly, right? Copyright, you create something tangible that's fixed in some sort of medium, like it's recorded, it's a painting, or it's music, it's a dance that's filmed or notated, things like that can be all copyrightable. And once you create it, it's automatic. It attached to you as a creator. But also, like any other property, you can give it away. You can sell it. So that's why it's really important to think about it when you do contract work as an artist. So, when you are hired to create a mural somewhere, right? You painted it. The work, physical work itself, that belongs to the owner who hired you. But the underlying copyright, meaning like reproduce, put it on somewhere and then sell it, right? Put it on t-shirt and sell it, put it on the mugs, sell it. There are other rights that come with creating art. So when you're contracting like that, are you giving up all those rights together? So that's what you really have to be careful about, because you're writing, creating creating an image, selling it. It's not just image itself. So who owns the work after it's created? If the contract says work made for hire, that's typically that the client owns all of it. You just created the work for them. But if that's what you wanted, that's fine, right? And you want to make sure that you get compensated for completely giving up your work. But if that's not what you wanted, then you want to make sure that you retain the copyright. Like license it back to the client so they get to use it, but also you get to use it as well. So you're not really giving up your copyright in that sense. So watch out for like total transfer of rights. That's you giving up everything. Again, if that was what's intended, that's fine, but just understand what you're doing and making sure that you get compensated for that. No license back to the client, right? You have no way to use it. Like sometimes they will say, you're giving up everything. We own all the copyrights, but you get to use it for, educational purposes, or you can put it on your website for talking to other clients, or you can use it for your portfolio or something like that. That's pretty typical, but even that's not there, and you can't even use it at all for your own personal use, and that can be an issue. And again, work made for hire, that's very common. But if that's not what you wanted, you didn't want to give up everything, then make sure that it's not there, right? And there are different arrangements that can be made. So it's not always one or the other, right? Extreme. There's always in between, you can do it. So one example is artist making, my client making work for a musician, is a band, and they're quite famous, and they sell a lot of a lot of merch. That's the slang they use. They have T-shirts, they have like water bottles, they have stickers, and all of those things. So my client was creating this work for the band, but he knew that once he creates that work, they're gonna make a lot of money out of that. And he felt like that was not fair. So what we ended up negotiating was if like one product line, for example, it's a T-shirt line, and that design and in that series, if that specific line of products make more than $100,000, then you have to pay my client 5% of the net you're making. So he gets something back. So we negotiated that, and they agreed to it. I mean, we gave a lot of options, several options. So they chose one. That's what we wanted, right? You kind of want to play the game a little bit. So it's if you give only one option, then they may say no. But if you give them many options that are like not so great to great, to their perspective, they're gonna choose something great for them. And that's something what you want too. So, there's some negotiation strategy involved, but you can do it. So there are ways, there are many ways to structure this. So examples, client receives a non-exclusive license to use the work. So as an artist, at least you want that, right? You want to make sure that you can use it for your own purposes. Or it may say something like, all rights, title, and interest are assigned to the client in perpetuity. That's you giving up everything, right? You never get to see that work again. Bye. It's all gone. They're gonna get to use it, reproduce it, display it. They're gonna have all the bundles of rights that comes with copyright. So watch out for property, intellectual property. Oh, sometimes it will be completely silent. They don't say anything about it. That's not good either. If it doesn't have the ownership terms in your contract, make sure that you put it in there. All right. Indemnification, or these are little. So this is like a scary word. Like we hear this all the time, but what does it mean? And if you have read indemnification clause in contract, they're very long and very dense. And they were just throwing a lot of things in there. You may not know what it means. Not because of your intelligence, it's nothing to do with that. It's really a lot of legalese, right? Just throw it in there, it's packed in there. So if you don't read it carefully, you may not understand what you're agreeing to. So typically speaking, indemnification, that means so if the contract says, I indemnify you, that means I'm covering for all your legal issues. I'm paying for every legal issue you have. That's going to come out of this contract. It's not fair, right? It sounds horrible. So if you agree to that, are you agreeing to cover the other party's legal risks, right? It should be equally distributed, not like one party covering everything. And who pays if something goes wrong, right? Maybe someone who caused that wrong should pay it, not the other party. So, there are many ways to structure this, but what you usually see is very one-sided because again, you're hired if a company with more power, right, more negotiation power, maybe they have a bunch of lawyers who's been helping and drafting contract for them. When they come with those contracts for you, that will be written for them, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're writing contract for you, you want to make sure that that works for you. It protects your interests. It's the same thing. If someone else is bringing the contract for you to sign, it's gonna be written from their perspective to protect their interests. So indemnity, again, it will be one-sided, working for them, meaning that you are indemnifying them, meaning you're paying their legal services if something goes wrong. So you want to watch out for that. And you don't want to agree to everything. I mean, it's negotiable again. So another thing is obligation to pay the other party's attorney's fees, right? That's very typical clause you will see, meaning that you're going to pay their attorney's fees as well, not only your own. Again, not fair. So some examples, each party is responsible for its own negligence in legal claims. That seems more fair. Or you see something like this. Artist agrees to indemnify and defend the client against all claims, including attorney's fees. That's something that you want to run away from. That's like really one-sided. If you agree to that, you're responsible for everything. You may think you won't need it, right? Hopefully, you won't need it. You won't need to use that. And everything will be good. Everyone's happy. You get paid. You go their separate ways. But sometimes, legal disputes happen, and I see more because I deal with a lot of them than what you may see, but things happen. And if you agree to indemnify them, then you indemnify them. And the courts will honor it unless it's very, obviously one-sided and unconscionable. So just be careful on what you agree on. And also on a general matter, you can contract pretty much anything unless it's illegal, right? Or it's against public policy. So you see a lot of funny clauses and agreements out there, but they are mostly honored because, the two parties agreed on it, right? It's a meeting of minds. They agreed on it, they signed on it, that's what they wanted, and the courts will honor that. So really make sure that you understand all the things you're signing before you do. And I've seen so many times that, artists sign contract that they should have not signed. Like I have one client who I've been working with for a long time now, and he's a musician, and he signed a contract that he should not have signed. And he signed it long time ago. He's still suffering. It's a royalty. He gave away his royalty, sold his royalty, and it's doing really well. And because of the contract that he signed, he's not singing a dime of it. And the contract is really, really bad. So if anyone with a law degree looked at it, would have said, do not sign that, but he signed it. So just be very, very careful. All right. And limitation of liabilities. So it's another one of those terms you see all the time in contract, but what does it actually mean? So it's like limitation on like recovery damages. So for example, if it says this, the liability limitation is capped at contract price. That means if you contracted for the work that you get paid for $3,000, let's say $3,000, then if something goes wrong and you sue them, right? For example, the client did something wrong and you decided to sue them, and they will say, oh, the limitation is capped at $3,000. So even though your damage is much larger, they will only pay you up to $3,000. So it's not fair, right? But it depends on the situation too. If you're just creating a logo for a company, the risk of the company being injured from their logo is very low, right? Just a logo. And you probably agreed on it and they gave you input and they were happy with the logo. Unless it's like, I don't know, so you created something that means something very offensive in another country, and then the company was doing business there and that they got, like bad reputation and something like that. Very unlikely, right? But if you're a set designer, you go into theater, you're doing, pretty much the physical work that's dangerous. You have a bunch of people around you, working on a set, making stuff. There could be injuries, right? Things may collapse on you. Injuries can be expensive. And if they say, even if we did something wrong, we're going to only pay you $3,000. So that's not fair. So that's what it means, limitation of liability. They're going to cap it at a certain amount. So if it depends, like no cap on liability, right? Just to think the other way around, right? It goes both ways. And you get injured and they say, oh, there's, so, you get injured and they say, oh, there's a cap, $3,000, here you go. You deal with the rest of the, hospital expenses. That's terrible. It could be the other way around too, right? You did something horrible and the company is gonna say, oh, you did a horrible thing, we're injured, but you may say, oh, too bad, it's capped at $3,000. But sometimes, like, having no cap would be good or terrible, right? If it depends on the situation. So you did something horrible, you didn't intend it, the company was injured, there was no cap. Well, now you're liable for a lot of damages. Not good, right? So really think about the situation, the nature of the work you're doing. That's going to determine what is good. So again, like too high, too small, or unclear, those are or can be good or bad, right? So really have to, this is like very situation specific. So for some examples you may see, liability is limited to total amount paid under this contract. That's pretty typical. Or like twice of the contract price. So I reviewed a contract from an architect once. And as you can imagine, with architect designing a building, things can go wrong. If it goes wrong, it's going to be expensive. And it was kept at contract price. And I think the service was about like $10,000 for his services. So we went back and asked for like 3 times and we both agreed to it, right? So it's not just one side is, capped at 3 times the contract and the other party is capped at like no cap, something like that. It's not fair. So you want to be symmetrical. That's more fair. But also we knew that the contract price wasn't enough if something were to go wrong. So we made it more. And sometimes you see something like contractor is responsible for all damages without limitation. Ugh, you don't want to agree to that. Really, stay away from it. So some sort of limitation is good, but one party assuming all of it or having no cap is not good, generally speaking. All right, and insurance. On a general matter, if you have a company, even if it's a sole prop that you're on your own, LLC, even if like small company that you own, it's always good to have a general liability insurance. Like I highly recommend it. If you don't have it, get one because you never know what's going to happen. The insurance is there for you and it's not that expensive. And also if you are doing some like specific like event-based work, right? You're installing artwork or you're having an event somewhere, then you can buy insurance for those couple of days or just one day. And those are very inexpensive and there are like so many options out there. So, get one. Those are great options. So, it's always good to have insurance than not. And if you don't have it and you need it, that's when you get in trouble. So, and also, what type and how much coverage that can be written down in contracts sometimes. Sometimes it will say insurance is required, get one, ends there. Or it will say, I want to see contract for this thing, the limitation, this much, and you also have to insure me as a client. You will see that as well. So watch out for requirements that are costly or difficult to obtain. If they're asking too much of insurance and you can't, just maybe contract price is $3,000 and they are asking you to buy $2,000 insurance, that doesn't make any sense. Also high coverage limits, again, the premium is gonna be expensive, so you may not be able to cover that. Requirements to name client as an additional insured. You see that a lot actually, but sometimes depending on your insurance company, it may not be allowed, right? If, I had a contract at an event at a hotel, and the contract said because it was event-based work and I was having people over and kind of having a party at a hotel for a couple of hours. So I had to get an insurance for one day and name the hotel as an insured, additional insured. And the insurance I got allowed that. But sometimes it may not allow something like that. If you have a general insurance coverage and you want to use that, and your company may not allow something like that. So really look for those. If the contract requires you to name the client to be a named party on the insurance and you can't do it, you want to go back. Like, I want to do it, but it's not possible, or it's going to be very expensive and it doesn't make any sense. So again, something you can negotiate, but know that it's there. You will find something like that. So some examples: contractor will carry general liability insurance for the performance. Very typical. You will see that all the time. Contractor must maintain $1 million in coverage and name the client as an additional insured. Maybe that's excessive. Maybe not, depending on the work. But, again, if it's there, you want to follow through with that. And if you sign the contract knowing that the contract required you to have insurance and you didn't have it, and if something goes wrong, that's going to be a problem. All right. And another clause that you want to look for is something, it's a catch-all phrase, restrictive clauses. It can be like reputation based, something like, the contract will say, you can't do anything that's going to harm us, right? Very vague, but you see something like that too. Or it may say, oh, like non-compete clause. You've seen that, you've heard about that, right? It says, if you work on this job, you can't work on another job that's similar to us, or you can't work for our competitors, something like that. If it's a full-time employment, that kind of makes sense, right? Like if you're working for Google full-time and they don't want you to work for, I don't know, OpenAI full-time at the same time, that's not going to work. So in that situation, it makes sense. You can't work for the competitive at the same time, or 6 months after you leave us or something like that. Even that's a little, generally courts don't like non-compete clauses, and those are not, because you're limiting people to work, and that's not good. But nonetheless, you see them a lot. So especially if it's a contract work and you see something like that, you want to strike it down because it's going to limit your ability to work on another job. And as a contractor, that's what you do. You have multiple jobs that you do at the same time. That's how you make living. And if the contract is prohibiting you from doing that, not good. Sometimes it will have like vague reputation clauses. Like if you do something that falls in the category of moral turpitude, well, what does that mean, right? It's too broad, too vague. Or like it will restrict you from working with others. Like let's say the service you offer is naturally a collaborative work, and you usually work with other people to get the work done. Maybe that's your expense that you pay out of your contract price or not, that can be assumed by the client. Either way, like that's the type of work you do, and the contract limits that you can't work with other people, or that's an issue. So, that kind of restriction will not work for you if that's the process of work you do. And again, non-compete language, right? If you work for this project, you cannot work on another. Like another example I can give you is my client who's actually a doctor who gives workshops for other doctors. So he's not necessarily in the creative industry, but nonetheless, he's an entrepreneur. So he gave me this long contract from this medical company that wanted to hire him to give workshops all over the country. And it said he cannot work for another company that's competitor for 3 years. So that was overkill. Obviously, we said like we can't agree to that. So we like literally deleted all of it and sent it back to them because that's not gonna work. So you will see something like that. Just say no. You can say no. Example, contractor may not work with the direct competitors during the term of the agreement. We just talked about that. So that's very, you will see it. Contractors shall not engage in any activity that could harm the client's reputation. Well, that's really broad. That's really broad. So something like that, you do not agree because, then they can use it as an excuse to fire you, right? If you just do something like that's not even like, really negative, but they may twist it in a way that fits into this contract term because it's so vaguely written, anything can fit in. And if they're using it to fire you or not pay you, they may do that. So you just want to prevent all those like scenarios from the beginning. So one of the jobs of the lawyer is to think about all the possible bad scenarios that can happen. Not always a good thing for your mental health, but it's good to think about it and prevent it from happening, right? There's off chance it's going to happen. When that happens, that's going to be bad. So we want to prevent all of that from happening from the beginning. That's the best way to prevent it. Okay. So we forget, a lot of people forget that they have power to negotiate. And or they may think it's rude to negotiate or it's not in their culture, right? Depending on where you're from, like negotiating is not something you do. But I don't know, you gotta negotiate. People expect you to too, right? And they may offer you something thinking you're gonna negotiate, and you didn't negotiate, and you're losing out on it. So just, I know some of you are great doing this. If you're doing it already, keep doing that. Negotiate. So normalize that, right? You can negotiate. It's a part of the process, going back and forth. So if you're not happy with certain clauses, if you're not happy with how ownership is drawn or not there, you can say, can we clarify ownership? If it says you can't use it at all, or they say like, we're gonna buy everything. You don't get to have anything. We're gonna have everything. We're gonna use it however we want. Well, you may not want that. What if they use it in a way that's against your philosophy, right? As an artist, let's say that happens, right? That's it's called moral rights, and that we're not going to get into that today, but there are rights that artists have that other people should not invade in. But in this country, there are less protections compared to like Canada and European countries. But you don't want people to damage your work after you hand it over. So you may say, you may not use this for certain purposes or something like that. So you can limit the usage that way. You can put it in the contract. You can really contract anything pretty much unless it's illegal and not in line with the public policy. Also, you can adjust payment timing, right? Instead of getting paid like 30 days after you complete the work, you may say, what if I get paid half at the beginning and then half like 10 days after completion of the work or something like that. So you don't have to wait until you're done with it and then another month to get money back, money for your work. So you can adjust that. And remember, contracts are draft, right? They may send it to you as a usually they come in PDF, right? They send it to you, like it looks like it's not editable, but that's not true. We get contracts in PDFs all the time. First thing I do is convert it to Word doc and start, striking it down and making notes, delete things that are just nonsense for my clients. So, it can be done. Don't be afraid doing that. All right. So it's a final encouragement. I think that's the last slide. Yes. So don't do handshaking deal like these guys are doing. Don't do that. Put it down in writing. Right, you have the rights, right? Your work, it's valuable. People want it. You have the leverage. You have the power to negotiate. Have, just understanding all those, like there's confidence in your work, and it's gonna help you protect what's yours and making it sustainable, right? You want to be able to do what you love to do for a long time, and that means that you have to make enough money for you to continue and enjoy the work and be able to sustain yourself. And if that's not the case, it's frustrating, right? People are taking advantage of you. They're stealing your work without getting paid. That's frustrating. So let's not do that if we can control it. There are a lot of things we can't control, but contract, we can to a degree. And when in doubt, call your attorney. Yes, they're not cheap, but like my artist example, the musician who signed the contract more than 10 years ago, he gave his royalty away, and well, he's still suffering, right? The contract that he should have never signed. So if you had your attorney looking at it back then and deleted some clauses that just didn't make any sense or too one-sided, very unconscionable, he could have avoided all of that. Or like really, there are other companies that can offer similar services without taking advantage of you in that way. So if you had someone to look at your contract back then and saved you from that there, you would have saved so much more money. And they didn't do it. I don't know why they didn't, right? Lawyers can be expensive, but they're not that expensive. So really it can help you from the beginning to avoid all that headache and issues in the future. So it's more like an investment, right? I'm a lawyer. Yes, it's my self-interest to say so, but really we save a lot of our clients' money and headaches down the road. So it's more like, my colleague always frames it in a way that it is like having like a general physician on your side, right? Monitoring your health. Sometimes you need an emergency doctor. Yes, we handle those too. But if you take care of yourself all the time, your visit to emergency doctors will be limited, and those are expensive. And same for the lawyers, right? If clients comes to us when it's too late and it's already emergency, it's gonna be much more expensive than to deal with it from the beginning. So this is my contact information. And like that's my cell number. Feel free to call me. Feel free to email me. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, although I work for a firm in Philly, and I travel there quite a lot. But I live in Lexington, Kentucky. So if you want to have a cup of coffee someday, reach out.
Thank you, Yuha. We have some questions for you if you're up for taking some questions.
Yes.
I have a question here. Um, when an independent artist producer is working in a creative partnership with an organization, and the organization is the recognized lead on a grant,
Uh-huh.
what kind of contract should be created to ensure that the artist producer gets paid everything that's written into that budget?
Yeah. So right, in that situation, you are not part of the contract, like contract in a grant, right? Think about grant. Grant is a contractual work. So if the organization gets a grant from whatever entity, that's the deal between them. So you are kind of third party beneficiary. So there are some rights that comes with it, but it's really difficult to enforce. So what you do is to have a contract with the organization that got the grant. So I mean, it's not the kind of contract, right? It's typical service agreement or service contract. It will lay out, right? And you can even attach the budget. So if you do X, Y, and Z within this timeline, by this time, you will get paid X amount of money. So it's very clear that you have a deal with the organization that has the grant with another entity. because you're not covered by their agreement, you have to have an agreement between you and the organization. So that's probably one of the only ways you can protect your rights.
Right. As an arts organization, is a memorandum of understanding enough to hire an artist, or do they need to have a contract or a letter of agreement with the artist?
So those things, MOUs, like memorandum of understanding, letter of agreement, contract, they are essentially all the same. We call it a little differently. For example, like letter of intent or letter of agreement will be typically shorter than what we call contract. And MOU can be, somewhere in between like letter of agreement and contract in terms of length. But they're the same. They're all contracts, one way or another. So it doesn't really matter. Like how long do you want to go? How detailed do you want to be? So, any contract is better than not having any. So, any of those things will work. It's just people call it differently. One example I can give you is, even if you don't have a written contract that's like, paper in rectangular, right, that says everything, there can be contract forms. For example, email exchanges, right? You're emailing back and forth and you agree on one thing, and then you said, okay, let's do it. That's a contract. You are sending an email with your signatures attached, right? Even if you don't have a signature, it's coming from you. So when people say signature, that's very loose term in legal context. Any like your initial or like your stamp can all be, or letterhead, that all can be constituted as signed. So just be careful when you didn't mean to negotiate something and then put it in writing in an email, you're bound to it. So be careful. Or sometimes it's a good thing, right? Like I had a client or potential client who had this, he agreed to offer this workshop or a class, series workshops for a nonprofit. And they were like texting with each other. The CEO of the nonprofit and my client were texting each other about the price, and they offered like $10,000 for the series of workshops. And he's like, great. And then later they came back to them and said, we can't offer you that much anymore, but we can do $5,000. Well, guess what? You wrote it down. You texted my client about the amount, so you kind of have a written contract in that way. So we were able to go back to them and share the email, the text threads, and then they agreed to $10,000. So be careful what you put in. Or if you want it to be binding, make sure you put it in writing.
So I've got a few more questions that were in the chat. If you are still on the call and have a question you want to ask, you're welcome to unmute yourself
Yes.
and ask directly.
I have a question. This is Carmen Mitzi.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi. You mentioned right in the beginning about paying out 90 days or
Mhm.
it's still kind of crazy to me that people are still trying to tell us artists that they can't pay us they'll make us wait 90 days.
Yeah.
Is that diminishing across the nation or can you push? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I'm tired of hearing it, but people still try to do that. Even institutions, they're like, "Oh, we'll pay."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it, especially like if I do like one-off contract work that's like research based or whatever, not through my firm, what I do is like really upon receipt of invoice, you gotta pay me right away. And I follow up with that. Like, just so you kind of, yeah, I mean, I really don't like when people say, oh, we're gonna pay you 90 days, blah, blah, blah. It's too long. But
Yes.
sometimes, it can be like they are bound by their contract, right? If they're paying you out of their grant, then maybe the time makes sense. But like, just be clear about it from the beginning, right? Why are you doing that?
And it's not rude to push it. I guess that's
Oh
what
no, no,
to
never.
ask, I should say.
Yes. I mean, even if you ask me, like, be rude. Like, you don't want to ruin your relationship that
Right.
way, but very clear. Like, if you
Yes.
ask, like, yeah, I'm told that I'm rude all the time. I don't care, right? You gotta take what's yours. Like, If you're waiting 90 days, that money that could have gotten
Yes.
in a theory, right? If you put that money in some investment account, you're
Yeah,
gonna be
right.
making money
Yes,
in interest.
exactly. Yep.
Actually, they are doing that. They are collecting money on your.
That's what I say. Oh my God, I agree. That's not right. That they, yep.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
exactly. Yeah, it's not rude. Just push it in a nice way,
Okay, thank you.
of course.
Bonnie from the National Quilt Museum has a question. Bonnie, do you want to ask it yourself?
Sure, thank you. So if you are reviewing a contract with an out-of-state organization and they absolutely insist on the contract being interpreted according to the laws of their state, how hard do I need to press on that?
Yeah.
Is that a deal buster, in other words?
Yep. So yeah, I didn't include that in my workshop, but you will see it. It's a choice of law, choice of venue. It's always there in your contract. So what it does is, so what is the law that they're gonna follow in case of any, misunderstanding or any dispute? What's gonna be the law that they're gonna follow? And the reason exists because in the US, you all know 50 plus states, each has its own law. So it's important, it matters, right? Which law is applied. And some states have a, more friendlier law to, big corporations than individuals, vice versa. So that's where the contract, the choice of law comes in. And typically what it says is like, it's gonna be the law of where the company or people hiring are located. The reason for that is they're comfortable with their laws, their attorneys are located there, right? And also if they have to go to court, it's close to them. So they don't have to incur cost to go to court, right? Traveling costs will be lower. But to you though, right? Contracting with them. So you live in Kentucky and it says, you have to litigate in California. Well, it's far away and it's expensive go there and things are more expensive there. And California law is one of those it's a little different from many other states. So, but at the same time, it's something that a lot of people won't move because it makes sense, right? Their attorneys are there. They understand the law there. So if they agree to a different law, for example, Kentucky, they're not gonna. So what I usually do is because they're not gonna budge on it. So if I have a multiple things I want to negotiate, I will throw in there as one of them. Like I don't like the choice of law clause. Like I don't want to go to California for this if something happens or whatever. Blah blah blah. And I would make a negotiation points and something that I will say, okay, I can give up that, but can you honor these things? So I will use it in that sense, knowing that most companies won't budge on that. And also, I don't think it's a deal breaker. And if that's the only thing that's holding up, probably it's okay.
I love that as a negotiating point. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Do you mind sharing what state you're thinking of hypothetically?
So hypothetically, the state that someone had suggested was New York. I asked that it be changed to the venue of Kentucky, and the person I was negotiating with said, how about we go with a neutral state? And we wound up going to Delaware in the contract.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's really good middle ground. You did really well on
Okay.
that. Yeah, but Delaware is everyone goes Delaware. Yeah.
Good
But
to
yeah,
know.
it's a good negotiating tip.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, William, go ahead.
If one is a conceptual artist, and I turned to art late in my life, but the part of it, I would ask too many questions in Louisville, going to art school, and they said you can't take any more art classes. So Dr. Friend, artist, he said just apply to the Chicago School of Art Institute. And I finished that degree, but being a conceptual artist and not really understanding law in the historical way it's been practiced, but if you redefine what your art is beyond law, then how can one create the work of art if you're pushing the boundaries of legal systems, but the art of life to me is the more important one, and I'm running out of time in my life. But I would be interested as much in the physics, the sciences, and the arts. There is a very deep science that's attached to it. And over the years, people would say, just go away. We don't understand you. And they'd say you're too abstract. Well, I think you're going to see the outcome of this in climate change. I didn't go to inexpensive universities to learn. It's just it would take me through mental illness. I survived that, but the way you're treated once somebody hears mental illness, when really I was as much interested in Sylvia Plath, Rothko, my nephew, because there's tragedies that are involved within trying to be an artist, but to understand just how poorly the economies can be for the creative types, the sensitive people, then what can one do? Because it still requires networking and investments, but you can be sidetracked from the joy of creativity. And in my mind, I just see it from a cosmological orientation.
Uh, well, William, I think you're asking more philosophical question than a legal question.
Well, that's what people have often said, but if the philosophy of law is by nature very linear, and you look at the scales of justice, but the creativity, really good, strong creativity, because part of it for me, when I used to go up to Canada for the planning school, I would get to know the gentleman who started the Committee on Social Thought at the University of Chicago, and he was friends with Chagall. And so there is a level of, when I really do better work, it's creativity is just a different way of thinking. You're making your inner language visual. I can't help it if people are saying go away or your price is not enough. And if you're trying to start a different career and move in this direction, I know what I've been about. It's just the people you'd go to within the legal framework. I mean, I would be given awards. You could be invited to the White House. You go up.
Oh,
William, I'm sorry.
we lost him.
Did
Okay.
you have any advice for William?
Oh, well, I think it's a much bigger conversation than what I can address today. So what I suggest is to reach out to me, William, like really email me. We can set up a time to talk about it. It's very interesting philosophical question to think about, but I think it's beyond what contract workshop can do.
So I have a question from Sarah Campbell. She had to leave, but
Yeah.
let's get it on the recording.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for artists to protect themselves from event cancellations?
Yeah, so that's another area. You know, since COVID, there's a force majeure clause, right, that became more popular or known. Basically, what it says is if something that happens that's out of your control, right, like a snowstorm or hurricane that's going to prevent you from doing the work, performing the work, then it's going to cancel the contract for both parties. So no one's going to do anything, no one's going to get paid for anything, right? That seems fair because you did not do the work. But the cause of cancellation is them saying, like, oh, we changed mind that we're going to cancel it, you don't get paid anything. So that's what I'm talking about termination clause, right? You want to make sure that you put it in there and say if you cancel, again, first of all, you have to have a cancellation, like how it's done, like how many days of notice do you have to give me, like 10 days or 30 days or whatever it is, right? You have to follow that first. And then whatever the work I've done so far, you have to pay me. So that's where I think it becomes tricky when you say, it's a contract price, it's a flat fee of $3,000. But then it's difficult to calculate the work that you did ahead of time, right? People may think, oh, whatever you deliver, that's it. There's a lot of prep that goes in there. That the hours you spend, that's the work you put in. How are you going to be compensated? So you may say if you if you cancel it, and I will charge you based on my hours of work that went into prepping it. And I will share whatever I prep so far. Sometimes it's not something you can share, right? If it's performance you've been practicing, or you can't really share the performance because they canceled on you, but at least there is some provision in there that's gonna get you paid for those hours. So I think that's one way to deal with it. And yeah, it is difficult, especially if it's not like hour based or something product that's concrete you're delivering, right? Arts are not that for the most part. So it can be tricky, but there are ways you can deal with it. So just anticipate it and what's gonna be your price if it was canceled or the prepping work. Maybe put it in there.
Thank you, Yuha. That was a lot of great information. We really appreciate you taking the time to provide us with all of this information and to respond to questions. And I know people have more questions for you. If you have additional questions, consider applying for a Kentucky Peer Advisory Network consultation. Yuha is one of the arts professionals on the Kentucky Peer Advisory Directory. These are people who are available to provide 6-hour consultancies to assist eligible organizations and individual artists. The consultancy fees are paid by the Kentucky Arts Council. The application and guidelines will be available this summer. You can also reach Yuha directly at laurasolomonesquire.com. That's LauraSolomonesq.com.
I just put it in the chat
Oh,
with
thank
my phone
you.
number. So yeah, feel free to reach out. And any other burning questions?
And I think we can wrap it
Yeah.
up. Thank you
Thank
so
you so much
much.
for being here.
We
Yeah, it
had
was
a
a lot
lot
of
having
fun.
you.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for joining us and for asking your questions and for listening in. We appreciate that. The video link, I'll email the video link out to everyone who registered once the video is available on YouTube. And we definitely will talk to you about coming back in the
Mhm.
future. Thank you so much.
Happy to. Okay,
Bye,
bye.
everyone.